Whatever you do, think of the glory of God as your main goal. St. Don Bosco. That's just some fan art I wanted to show you. Today's episode is part 2 of our story about Michael Magone, who I thought was a saint in the oratory. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, just click on the card that should appear on the screen. The Miracles and Prophecies of St. Don Bosco, a project of American Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. When Don Bosco was in Turin, Michael Magone asked him for permission to make his priestly vows, but Don Bosco wouldn't allow him to do so. He wanted Michael to be content for a while by making a simple promise. In that young man, the grace of God inspired a lively desire for perfection. In May 1858, Michael set out to do what he could to honor Mary. He accomplished the mortification of his eyes, tongue, and other senses. He also wanted to deprive himself of part of the recreation period, fast and spend some of each night praying. But these practices were forbidden to him because he was too young. At the end of the month, he presented himself to Don Bosco and told him, "If you let me, I want to do something special in honor of the great Mother of God. I know that St. Aloysius liked Our Lady very much because from his childhood, he consecrated the virtue of chastity to her. I also want to present this gift to her. Therefore, I wish to make a vow to become a priest and preserve perpetual chastity." Don Bosco replied that Michael was not yet at the age to make vows of such importance. "Still," Michael interrupted, "I greatly desire to give myself entirely to Our Lady. If I consecrate myself to her, surely she will help me to keep my promise." "Do this," suggested Don Bosco. "Instead of a vow, make a simple promise to embrace the ecclesiastical state, provided clear signs of your vocation appear by the end of your Latin studies. Instead of the vow of chastity, promise the Lord never to do or say a word contrary to chastity. Every day invoke Our Lady with some special prayer that she may help you to keep this promise." Michael was pleased with that proposal. A few days later, Don Bosco gave him a note and said, "Read this and practice it." Michael opened the note, in which Don Bosco reminded him, "St. Philip Neri gave young people 5 reminders to persevere in the virtue of purity. 1. Flee from bad company. 2. Do not pamper the body with dainty food. 3. Escape idleness. 4. Offer frequent prayer. 5. Go often to the sacraments, especially confession." What Don Bosco said briefly in the note, he extensively expounded to Michael at other times. He gave him these pieces of advice. "Put yourself under the protection of Our Lady with childlike confidence. Trust and hope in her. Never have we heard of anyone who confidently appealed to Mary without being heard. She will be your defense in the assaults that the devil will make on you. When you're tempted, busy yourself with something. Idleness and modesty cannot live together. By avoiding idleness, you will also overcome temptations against purity. Kiss the miraculous medal and the crucifix often. Make the sign of the Holy Cross with lively faith, saying, 'Jesus, Joseph, Mary, help me to save my soul.' These are the 3 most terrible and most formidable names to the devil. If temptation continues, turn to Mary with the prayer proposed to us by the Holy Church. 'Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for me, a sinner.' Do not pamper the body. Guard your senses, especially the eyes. Above all, avoid bad books. If a book, however innocent seeming, upsets you, stop reading it. On the contrary, read good books, and among these give preference to those books that speak of the glories of Mary and the Blessed Sacrament. Flee bad companions. Choose good companions, friends your superiors praise for their excellent conduct. With them, speak willingly and engage in recreation. Imitate them in speech, in the performance of duties, and especially in the practices of piety. Go to confession and communion as often as your confessor allows. If your duties permit, visit our Lord Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament frequently." Don Bosco gave Michael these counsels continually, in public and private, verbally and in writing. He would add, "Perhaps some may say that such practices of piety are too ordinary. But just as the splendor of the virtue we speak of can dim and be lost at every little breath of temptation, I judge that any smaller thing that helps to preserve virtue must be held in great esteem. For this, I propose easy things that neither frighten nor weary the faithful, especially the youth. Fasts, prolonged prayers, and similar rigid austerities can be mostly omitted, or they would be practiced with either pain or laxness. Let us keep to the easy things, but do them with perseverance. This path led Michael to a marvelous degree of perfection. It also made his charity toward his neighbor shine. He was always ready to write letters for those who needed to send them. He rendered his comrades any service in the dormitory and elsewhere. He swept floors, made beds, cleaned clothes, explained lessons they had not understood in school, consoled the downhearted, interceded with superiors, catechized outsiders, taught singing, willingly forgave any offense, and served the sick, even at night. Only God knows the evil he prevented and the good he caused. We need not linger on the specific details, but we will not omit an unpublished document so that it may be preserved. We can learn two beautiful facts from a letter that Michael's fellow disciple, Matthew Galliano, wrote to Don Bosco. Here's how Matthew expressed himself. He wrote, "The first fact is that once Michael held a small candle, almost 4 fingers tall, and invited me to church to pray for the conversion of sinners. Moved by his gracious words, I complied. Entering the church, we went to the altar of Mary, where he lit that candle, and we recited the 3rd part of the rosary. I was already tired of praying and disposed to leave when he kindly urged me to continue the prayer. We prayed until the entire candle burned down." The second fact is as follows. One Saturday evening, many artisans were gathered in the parlor after dinner. The bell for confessions had already rung, but they didn't want to go and were playing a game. When Michael came, he greeted one another with good manners. He urged them to go to confession and be reconciled to Jesus Christ, but all in vain. Then he very craftily played with them for a quarter of an hour, and afterwards said to them, "Come with me to the 2nd floor." They all went with him, believing he intended to continue the game there. But being at the door of Don Bosco's room, he managed to talk them all into going to confession. The enchanting goodness of Michael and several of his companions flourished and bore luxurious fruit because of their obedience. They showed not only the precepts, but all of Don Bosco's advice. One evening, after walking through the porticos with a large group of boys for some time, Don Bosco felt tired and took them to the playground. He squatted on the ground and asked them to join him. Crouching down was uncomfortable, but no one stirred, afraid they would miss a word. Don Bosco spoke of the tremendous spiritual good that still needed to be done and its urgent need. Then, after saying that God wished the oratory boys to help in doing this good, he exclaimed, "How much good could be done if I had 10 or 12 good priests to send into the world? Who will volunteer?" "I will! I will!" all cried together. Don Bosco smiled at their spirited response. You can see from these stories how a great saint will often cultivate an environment in which other saints can also flourish, as I believe is the case with Michael Magone. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like to hear about the dream of St. John Bosco titled The Wheel of Fortune, just click on the video I've put at the top of the screen. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. You ready to go? Let's go.